Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. I'm really excited about today's show. It's actually not very often that I get to interview somebody who I would consider a legit hero of mine, to be honest with you. I feel that way about a lot of the people who are whistleblowers, the Edward Snowdens of the world, Julian Assange, even though, even the people that you don't think that you might like in person, like Julian Assange doesn't seem like a guy that I might want to hang out with, but the work that he did, I think, is important with WikiLeaks. Chelsea Manning, the same thing. And my guest today as well. She is an Air Force veteran. She is also a former NSA translator who received the harshest sentence for a person who was convicted of the type of crime that she was convicted of, which was leaking classified material to a news outlet. But the ramifications of her case and the ripple effect of her case are still kind of being felt today. And I think it's important to at least recognize that when people put their own lives on the line in order to make their country better, that should be something that we all take a step back and fight against state powers that would want to keep people like that in prison. Especially when it's more political than anything else. And so, today we're going to be able to speak with someone who has experience in all of those levies, and especially the sort of lack of justice that came with her case. And I would like to welcome to the show, Reality Winner. Reality, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming. Your case is one of those cases that I remember reading about at the time and thinking, wow, 5 years for something that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the harshest sentence ever received for someone convicted of something like that. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, so far 63 months, so 5 years and 3 months was the harshest sentence, the longest one, and apparently award-winning if you were on the prosecution team.
Yeah, and actually we were speaking before the show started. I didn't know that Samantha B, formerly of The Daily Show, I can't remember what show she hosts now, but did a whole 11-minute thing on your story that I thought was hilarious. But the one thing that stuck out for you was was it the district attorney?
Yes.
Can you explain what the district attorney did that was so off-putting? Because I just watched it, but I thought before I watched it, I had no idea that he did it. And you were like, Samantha B was the only one to cover what he just did. Can you tell us what he did?
So what the prosecution did was they made excellent use of the media. All aspects of my character and conduct that had nothing to do with the actual charge or indictment, they aired publicly. But only when it helped their case, only when I was up for bond were they concerned with my diary entries. Only when I was, basically we presented that historically everybody who has been charged under 793E of the Espionage Act has gotten pretrial bond, pretrial release. There is no flight risk. My parents were actually willing to offer everything they own as collateral just so that I could be out of the abusive county jail conditions while we worked on a defense, my own criminal defense. And so the DA and the prosecution, really turned this into some kind of scandal over who I was. And the day that I was sentenced, even though it was an agreed plea deal, even though I took full responsibility for my actions, and even though the court accepted the plea deal, they chose to, erect a podium outside the courthouse and have this entire press conference over what a bad person I was, when all I ever did was take responsibility for what I did from day one.
Yeah, that was part of what I thought was so heroic about what you did, is that you didn't you didn't hide. You know, like there was no, it felt like there was no hesitation. And then when the hammer started to come down on you, that you were like, yeah, I did it. Let's deal with the fact that I did it, and let's see what we can work out. Were you expecting a sentence, like, or were you expecting there to be some sort of leniency?
So I wasn't expecting a sentence because while I knew I violated NSA rules and my oath of taking a contract under NSA, I really thought it was very obvious as to why I did what I did and that no harm was done. Um, but I didn't actually understand the political timing of what I did. And I didn't
Yeah.
understand that they wanted someone to nail to the door and that I was the perfect someone for that. So really what I thought is that I did it, and I thought that under 793E of the Espionage Act, once indicted, that you can take it to trial and you can argue, intent, that there was no criminal intent and there was no damage caused and there was, no malice in it. And unfortunately, that's not relevant to the charge.
Yeah.
And that almost makes it impossible to go against in a court of law. I did what I did and I was willing to take some responsibility. Um, but really, if I had taken that to trial, I'd still be in prison today. I would have gotten the full 10 years.
Yeah, and that's what's really strange about it. I just want to put a little quote up from Samantha B as well. So she says the information that she revealed, many states have been using it ever since to secure their election system. We need just to remind people of the debt that we owe Reality Winner, because we actually really do. There's a communication petition in place, or sorry, a commutation petition in place, and I really hope that the Biden administration honors that. She really made a difference. She's a whistleblower, not a spy. And then there was another one, and I think out of anyone's audience, my audience is the most likely to pen a sternly worded letter and send it to the exact right person. This is a big deal. She's being facetious there because she's a comedian and not a political stalwart. But it's funny and not funny that the person who seemed to be to have the best sort of way of explaining your case is a comedian. That doesn't apply to our political climate right now.
I mean, that's where we're getting so much of the uncensored truth from these days. It's not going
I
to
would
be on
agree.
corporate news media.
No, it's not. And you have such an interesting career. I know you don't like to talk about what you did for the government. I know you can't talk about certain things that you did for the government, but if I may just sort of give the audience a clue. What you did when you were in the Air Force and what you did with the NSA, it almost seems like you should be kind of a darling of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. When you were in the Air Force, you were part of the drone strike program. You helped identify terrorists. I think, didn't you receive some sort of commendation for helping remove 100 plus enemy combatants from the battlefield?
I did receive a service medal in the Air Force.
Can I ask you if that was a difficult job?
I think that most military careers are really difficult. And because of a lot of personal turmoil that I had in my early 20s with mental illness, that, my career was extremely difficult and hard on me in a lot of different ways.
And then you went to the NSA and became a translator. You were working for a subcontractor of the NSA. Is that right?
Correct.
People don't know how smart you are, I think. Like, you speak, how many languages do you speak? 3?
English on a good day, but I can read classical Latin, some biblical Hebrew, and then I was trained to know Farsi, Dari, and Pashto.
Yeah, see, Samantha B kind of talked about this too, when she called the whistleblowers the whistleblower bros, and she cited Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, and at the time, Bradley Manning, who's now Chelsea Manning. I feel like the media, especially, Fox was not your friend, but they didn't spend enough time talking about how accomplished you are and how intelligent you are and how broad your skill base is, because your skill set is that of a person who is like a Rhodes Scholar. Like, you're speaking these languages, you're helping out your government, making your country safe. And all that came out, like, I mean, Fox News did like 6 stories about your pantyhose because that's how you snuck out the classified documents. just as a woman, I'm just curious. Like, did you sort of feel, excuse me, that you weren't being taken seriously because you were a female?
Exactly. But we were afraid to talk about any of that because it was weaponized against me, only during the bond hearings. Um, Basically, the lead prosecutor said that as a child wanting to join the military, because 9/11 happened when I was 9 years old, that I had decided that I was going to join the Air Force simply so I could be in a position one day to release documents. My military service, I mean, it took me years to view myself even as a veteran again because how they weaponized my military service. They let the judge believe that because the Air Force had trained me in Farsi and Pashto, that I was going to take my life savings and run away from these charges and rebuild my life in those countries, even though like nobody wants to live in Iran or Afghanistan. Like
No.
I'm a woman, the gender nature of the attacks against me, everything I was able to do, everything that I knew was weaponized against me. And so we were, when talking about how to get my story out and how to let people know that, I'm suffering here, this is what's happening to me. We were afraid to talk about this.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, and listen, I'm going to try to figure out a way how to talk about this next subject in a way that doesn't make you feel like I'm throwing anyone that you might know or be friends with under the bus, because that's not my intention. But the fact that the Intercept, when they received those documents from you, sent it back to the NSA. I was really like, I didn't know about that detail until just a couple of days ago. Your whole life would have been completely different if they didn't do that. Did you ever get an explanation? Did you ever get an explanation as to why that happened? Because I know Glenn Greenwald Glenn Greenwald claims that the editor at the time, her name escapes me, is the reason that happened. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or who you blame, if anyone.
I've worked with several journalists since then, and they've personally sought answers from the Intercept. And, journalism 101, protect your sources. They failed at that, but not only for me, but for Daniel Hale, who is still in prison, as well as Terry Aubry, who is still on federal supervised release. He was sentenced a year after I was arrested. So they simply don't protect their sources and then write about them later as some type of martyr. I think it's a pattern. I think it's by design. It doesn't lessen what I did. I broke the law, and I'm always going to take responsibility for that. They would have found me anyway. The feds would have figured it all out. It's not like I truly hid my identity in any way.
Just in Glenn Greenwald's defense, I mean, he doesn't seem like the type of journalist that would do that. So I do kind of believe him when he said that it was probably someone else up on the food chain. Can you tell me who those other people are that you just mentioned and what they were sentenced, why they were sentenced? Because that my Canadian audience might not be familiar with that.
Okay, so Terry Aubry was an FBI agent who witnessed firsthand racial discrimination against Black communities in America, especially Black Muslim communities. And, his viewpoint was that, he joined the FBI to stop child sex trafficking in the United States, to protect communities. And time again, he was being sent to illegally infiltrate mosques simply because he was the only Black man in the office. And so he gave that information to the Intercept. And in basically the sloppy way that the Intercept released all of this information, kind of directly pointed back towards him. It didn't take the FBI that long. He received 40-something months. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact number. He got out shortly before I did. And the same thing with Daniel Hale is that he gave information to the Intercept, and the Intercept took him on book tour, with them. He's been photographed with them. And the FBI and the DOJ had basically had him on notice for years with 11 indictments of 793E pending against him. They just never formally decided to charge him. And so he had been on pretrial release for years and years and years. And finally, in, I believe it was early 2020, he was also, as part of his pretrial release, he was required to go to therapy, but the therapist was a government therapist. And so the moment he expressed intention for self-harm, he was immediately put in solitary confinement in a county jail. And that is why he pled guilty, because he had no choice. It was indefinite detention in solitary confinement in the Alexandria County Jail because he told a therapist that he thought he was going to harm himself. So he was sentenced and he received 46 months.
Wouldn't that just make a person's mental state that much worse, right? Like,
absolutely.
You're an advocate on prison reform now, aren't you? Because of what you experienced when you were inside, right?
Yeah. I mean, I find reform to be a dirty word. I'm more of an abolitionist.
Okay. An abolitionist in the sense of you don't want for-profit prisons and the way they're run right now, or you just think that sentencing people to be in jail is what should be abolished?
So definitely any type of incarceration or detention for nonviolent crimes is extremely costly to the taxpayer. However, none of that money goes to the inmate. It costs the U.S. taxpayer approximately $32,000 to $35,000 a year to house each federal inmate. Yet they fed us for less than $2 a day. We didn't have any equipment. I was a tutor in the GED program for people, and we were using high school and middle school textbooks from like 2002. It was ridiculous, the lack of resources that we had. So if the true cost of every taxpayer dollar went to the inmates, you would see less recidivism. However, because it is for profit, it's a freaking turnstile. It's just a door. It's a pipeline to keep going back to prison because it's profitable. So, I mean, I'm, looking at policy solutions to figure out how we can only temporarily detain people who are actively causing harm or actively violent, and what the actual rehabilitation is for that to get them back in society and not harming people anymore.
Yeah, you know what? When you're talking there, it makes me feel like, because prison is theoretically supposed to be about rehabilitation. Obviously, we probably know that most of the time that doesn't happen. So, when you were talking, it made me feel like maybe the prison system needs rehab. Maybe reform is a dirty word. Maybe rehab is a better word for that, because the for-profit. I'm from Canada. We have universal healthcare. So there's two things now in my life that don't make sense. When you add for-profit in front of them. One of them is for-profit healthcare. That just seems like oxymoronic. And for-profit prisons, I would put in that pile as well. And you're living proof of that. When I was doing my reality winter deep dive, and I was listening to you talk about the conditions inside prison and how you were, you were thinking of taking your own life at one point. And I think you credited your mom for helping you through that dark period.
Yes, there was so much serendipity going on that October, because I was in that space for maybe 3 weeks straight, just waiting for the right day and, really practicing what I was going to do over and over again. And it just so happened that there was a day that, well, first of all, in those 3 weeks, my mom kept putting off her trip. She was supposed to go back to Texas. Any day now, she was going to leave. And I was just like, okay, fine. Like, soon as she gets home, that's it. And just so happened that she didn't leave. And there was a day that I was randomly transported to the courthouse to meet with my attorneys, because everything was so top secret that they made us, meet in a janitor closet that didn't have air conditioning. So you're looking at my attorneys that are like in suits, sweating like crazy. And there's like it's like a 6x3 room. You know what I mean? It was smaller than my jail cell, that you're expecting my paid attorneys to meet with me in. So anyway, that actually, I had like a complete mental breakdown that day. And, I called one of my attorneys once I got back to the jail and I said, so I'm actually not okay right now. And this is what's going on. And like when I kind of came out to him with my mental illness, he immediately understood. Like, I didn't think any of the men were going to understand like how serious and life-threatening a condition that bulimia is for women. I mean, for men too, but I mean, for women especially. And he immediately understood. He said, oh, this is not okay. You can't be in there. And it was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not okay, And I think being able to come out and just say that, like that decreased the burden by so much. But shortly after that, I was medicated, and say what you will about SSRIs, I haven't killed myself, I got out of that. But yes, mental illness in any kind of confined space, and they say all the time, the conditions of the jail, the conditions of detention, the conditions of any prison that you're in are not the punishment. The separation from society is it's a consequence of your action, but the conditions under which you are housed is not a punishment. It just is so crazy why the conditions are so abusive, neglectful, and retaliatory.
Absolutely. One of my biggest fears is, in fact, my ex is still mad at me to this day because I went to a film festival in Arizona, and it was April Fool's Day, and I told her that I got arrested and placed in prison. It was a joke, and she still hasn't forgiven me because of because of what she thinks of American prisons. They scare the shit out of me. Like I am.
Holy shit, I'd be mad at you too.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize to every single woman I see now. No, but it's true. Like, I mean, and it doesn't soften that blow when the prison is a women's prison. It's just as horrendous and just as scary, right?
It's actually worse. And they tell us that if you wanted things to be better, then you would stick together like the men do, and you would riot properly, and you'd get what you want. That's why your food isn't better. That's why your recreation center isn't better, because y'all don't stick together like the men. So even within the prison, the officers and the lieutenants talked down to us and said, you deserve these conditions because you're female, because you're not like men and you're not going to riot like men.
Wow. So they can't just reward you with good food because you're behaving well? Like like they reward bad behavior? That's the concept?
Exactly, because they're allotted X amount of dollars per day to feed us, and most of that budget goes towards the staff groceries.
Wow.
They go grocery shopping in prison kitchens.
Really?
We used to run out of food on days where there were like salads, or like they had like these little microwavable pizzas where it's like, if that was the only pizza you were going to get for the next 20 years, like women took that night seriously. And I had heard from one of the kitchen workers that the staff were carrying out boxes of these little fucking microwavable pizzas that you can get for $2 at Walmart, taking out boxes of them. And lo and behold, that night, they didn't even have enough to feed the last unit of 150 women.
As an Italian, I'm offended just because of the pizza, but as a human being, I'm offended because of the rest of it. You're making me think of of how prison systems, not only the can you say the word for me, please?
Recidivism.
Thank you very much. The recidivism, but just the toll that it does take on the mental health. So even if you're not a person who reoffends, you're now trying to enter a world that is unfamiliar to you in a lot of cases, with anxiety and depression and possible suicidal thoughts or bulimia or whatever, like you're and they put you back in that place. And then, it does feel intentional.
It's
the system is meant to be that way.
It's meant by design to break you down. And then right when you're at like that, your snapping point, you're released. And the halfway house, the transition home, is 10 times harder, and it's 10 times more arbitrary. And then, I finally got out of that and got put on probation. And, I had a half marathon planned on my birthday because my favorite thing to do on my birthday is run 13.1 miles.
Nice.
And it was 2 hours away. But here I am on supervised release, seeing people on supervised release who are traveling across state lines, staying overnight, going on vacation. And my probation officer said, "Oh, no, you're not leaving the Southern District of Texas." And I said, "Well, I have a half marathon in San Antonio." And he said, "I don't see why I would ever let you go to San Antonio." And, I had a mental breakdown. Like, you have someone like me who I have everything to live for. And I reach these breaking points time and time again. Like, you can ask my attorney. I call her all the time. Like, I just want to go back to prison. Like, at least I get the world in there. And I know how bad it can get. Out here, it's so hard to have things that I want to do and be so close. And everybody else gets treated normally. And here I can't even go 2 hours away from my home. I have to have a special court, I guess, permission slip to go to work because I coach at 5:15 in the morning. And my curfew, which nobody else on federal probation has, is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I'm 30 years old and I have a 10 p.m. curfew every night of the year.
How long is that probation for?
Till November 2024.
Wow. And you have, if I'm not mistaken, well, I'm sure you have, but or maybe you haven't. Have you appealed to the Biden administration to, for what would you call that, a commuted sentence? Or
I appealed. I applied for a pardon in June. And within 2 weeks, the Biden administration response was, "You're not even eligible to ask for a pardon. Try again in 2026.
when your probation's over?
Yeah, when my life goes back to normal, and basically it's like, okay, I have a felony record. In Texas, that doesn't really mean much. So, I don't know. I don't know what life is going to look like in 2026, but I'm not really going to need a pardon as much as I do right now when I'm trying to rebuild and see my family."
Yeah. Can I just as an aside, I've been to Texas. I went to Beaumont, Texas to visit my friend.
Hmm.
Not a good place to start your Texas travels.
Yeah, I was like, ooh.
Yeah. I'm from Canada. I had never heard a gunshot before. I think I was like 17. And then I get to the bus stop in Beaumont, Texas, and I'm reading the local paper, and it's like 3 dead and 7 injured at the Rock and Robin nightclub. And I'm like, oh, it's crazy. And then I got picked up and I went to my buddy's apartment where he was with his family, and we went out to the balcony, and right across the street was the Rock and Robin nightclub. And I'm like, oh shit. So, and you have an AR-15 that's pink. That's interesting. I don't understand why Fox News doesn't love the shit out of you if you have a pink AR-15.
Oh yeah, CNN was afraid to cover that. I had wanted an AR-15 throughout my time in the military, and just because of the politics, it was really hard to get one.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad basically got a bunch of parts and built it by hand.
What?
And so there's one part of it that jams all the time. So I call it the Jam Master, but it's pink. I have like these metallic, well, I had, none of this is in my possession anymore, DOJ, don't worry. But I had like these metallic pink magazines for it and like a lime green case.
Yeah. I'm Canadian. I don't know if I've ever seen an AR-15, but to have a pink one, it just made me surprised that Fox News was so hard on you. Is it true that the James Comey firing was kind of the thing that triggered you to actually maneuver on the classified materials to begin with?
That really makes sense. And I've actually had to, this is so bad, like, not playing dumb here, but the trauma, I don't remember that day. And to help with my memory, I've read the FBI interrogation transcript to see like what I told them and what I was feeling. I cannot tell you what the day of May 9th felt like, other than I got out of work. I know I went to yoga that night because that was the mailbox that I used. But yeah, there's just been so much trauma, and I don't know why I did it that day. I really don't. It's crazy.
Do you regret it?
Absolutely, yeah. 0 out of 10 would not do again.
Really?
Yeah, breaking the law is not my thing. The consequences were so harsh. Obviously, I didn't save the country, and I had a really fulfilling career, and I was really on to doing some great things in the world as far as de-escalating the global war on terror, which was kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into humanitarian aid, and that's all gone now. I live with my parents and I coach CrossFit full time, which
I
is
think
wonderful. I love it, but
yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, I mean, you look like you're in like amazing shape, and I mean, it's your job to kind of stay in shape, and that must be in and of itself kind of therapeutic, no?
oh, absolutely. And I mean, one of the weird things about this is wherever I have been detained or incarcerated. Sorry about that.
Listen, the last podcast I had, my dog howled until I just had to get off the air, so it's totally fine.
Wonderful. He should calm down in a second once we get our mail.
No worries.
You
Is
know,
that the mailman?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Wow,
big event.
classic dog. Yeah.
Everywhere I've been, I made the best of it, and I kept my love of CrossFit. Even if it was in the county jail doing pistol squats and handstand push-ups. And when I got to prison, I made it my goal. Within 8 months, I took over the recreation center. I was the lead fitness instructor. I ran nutrition programs for women. I taught rehabilitative yoga. I did circuit training, cycling, you name it. You know what I mean? Teaching 5, 6, 7 hours a day, because it was like, I was just looking at, these are normal people. I've never taught fitness to normal people before. I've always been surrounded by athletes or people in the military. And so I became a better coach and a better instructor because of my time. And so coming out into the community and immediately getting a job as a CrossFit instructor, I mean, it was meant to be, and it made my 4 years incarcerated meaningful.
I'm just curious. I'm just thinking of this question now. So, I mean, it might be a stupid question for all I know, but was the government allowed to continue to question you once you were incarcerated?
No, but the pressure did not let up. Everything I did or said, I would immediately be called up front, and then it would be one of my attorneys saying, whoa, 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 you said this to your sister 3 hours ago, and the prosecution is mad. And I'm just like, what are they going to do? Put me in jail? Like,
yeah.
I didn't cross a line, It would come up in hearings. Like we said, listen, like, she's bulimic. She's not doing okay. Mm-hmm. And they were just like, oh, well, Special Agent Garrick has been at the jail. He's watched her working out. She gets plenty of exercise. And it was just like, I had written a note to one of the guys down the hall, because you can do that in small county jails. And I just said, he asked how I was doing. He said, we heard you were vegetarian and there's no way you're eating enough. What can we send you? Like, that's how county jail goes. It's insane.
Are you a vegetarian?
I was, yes, at the time.
Yeah.
Religious vegetarian. And they couldn't, even though I was a federal inmate, they couldn't provide a kosher menu. And they couldn't even provide a vegetarian substitute. So I said, don't worry. Like, I got an entire tray of peas and corn. Peas and corn are dope. And so the lead prosecutor unrolled this itty bitty note that was in a sugar packet that I was trying to throw down the hall. Wow. And said, the defendant is eating just fine. It says right here, peas and corn are dope, And I'm just like, I'm livid. But I'm also like, I just made a federal prosecutor say peas and corn are dope.
Yeah, I'm just happy that a 30-year-old knows what the word dope is, because it's kind of an old school term, right? Are you a hip hop girl? Yeah,
kind of.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of hip hop do you like? Because I'm a hip hop head, and as you can probably tell from the intro music,
Oh yeah, I enjoyed that. Lately I've just been feeling a lot of Rick Ross, Meek Mill. I really feel Meek Mill right now, because we're both on probation.
Yeah, I was about to say all the prison stuff, eh?
I mean, obviously you go back into the 90s, love 90s hip hop, but yeah, me too. Really feeling that right now. Of course, Lil Wayne, because I got a Lil Wayne tattoo in prison. I mean, just loving it. So,
dude, that's the most hardcore gangster thing I've ever heard. You got a Lil Wayne tattoo in prison. Your favorite rappers right now are former prison guard and Meek Mill. This is like, you're gangster.
It was so it was actually really funny because we were on lockdown that week because it was the inauguration and they were expecting another January 6th. So anytime we went on lockdown, it meant that the prison riot controls were actually out on the streets.
Oh,
And so because the prisons were, skeleton crew manning, we would get locked down. So we were locked down for the inauguration. And so part of that was we weren't allowed to watch the news. We could watch movies all day, but we couldn't watch the news. And so that Sunday night, I was just like, fuck it, we're on lockdown. I'm going to sneak into somebody else's cell and get, this tattoo that I've wanted for a while. And
shit! So you got a tattoo like under like the cover of, like, it wasn't like an actual tattoo person that came in, staff is there supervising, like this is a legit prison tattoo.
Yeah, it was a poke and stick. And it was WWLWD, what would Lil Wayne do? And then the next morning that motherfucker gets a pardon from Trump.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my
I was
God.
like, it's a sign. It was meant to be.
Yeah, it was. Well, here, listen, I have a May 9th trauma story as well. May 9th is the anniversary of me and my ex. So every May 9th, I also experienced a little bit of trauma. It's true. I'm going to play a clip, and it's the shortest clip of all time. But I want you to know that despite the regret that you might feel, the granddaddy of whistleblowers feels a little bit differently. So we'll just take a look at this and we'll talk about it when we come back.
And that is, do you think that reality winners should be freed?
Yes.
Daniel Ellsberg. He went on to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff after that had not much to do with you. But Daniel Ellsberg, for those who don't know, the person that leaked the Pentagon Papers, he said his regret was that he leaked the Pentagon Papers after the war was done. I think, but he, I still think he's a hero. But he has kind of a good point there. I mean, when you saw what was happening in the news, you might not have a memory of it because of the trauma that you experienced. And I'm really sorry that you did experience that trauma. But really, at the end of the day, you saw what was happening in the world and you tried to do something about it. And you got a 5-year sentence for your troubles. Out of that 5 years, how much did you serve? Was it just over 4.5 or something?
It was technically 4.5 years in federal custody.
Okay. How does it make you feel when someone like Daniel Ellsberg, like, legit refers to you as a hero?
I mean, it feels good. I actually didn't know much about him or until somebody sent me the Pentagon Papers when I was in prison.
Oh, wow.
I did zero research before I did what I did, guys. Sorry. So I had no idea that there was like such history to this. And I have done some webinars with him last summer when I was on home confinement, and we were supposed to have like a one-on-one Zoom session, but it fell through. But that would have been really nice. It's flattering. Yeah. He's an American icon. He's a hero.
He is. He's a legit hero. We have a person, a viewer there that's saying, Rob Rogers, I wrote to her in prison a few times. She's really an awesome person. What they did to her was terrible. She never belonged there. Do you remember getting letters from a lot of people when you were in prison?
Oh, yeah. It was really embarrassing at mail call sometimes. Sometimes I've had officers just hand me, like, there's 200 people in a unit, and the officer just hands me like a whole bucket of mail, like in front of 200 people, and says, "I'm sure that's yours anyway." It was really like anxiety because I don't like attention. Yeah. But so much mail, so many books. I could get any book I wanted for anybody on the unit, and people knew that. So I would just send out book lists because people were so desperate to send me things.
You were like Brooks from Shawshank.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Walking around with your little squeaky wagon of books, handing them out to the fellow inmates.
Yeah.
That must have been, like, for all intents and purposes, because you do seem like a person who tries to find the positive. And I know that you were going through some stuff, but was there an upside to prison? And was that one of them?
It was. And then for me, I consider it 4 years of university because a couple weeks before the FBI raided me and arrested me, my sister and I had watched the documentary 13th together. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about systemic racism in the United States. We were talking about environmental racism. In fact, I had visited the state director of Georgia about a situation that was happening, on the river in Georgia that was going to affect predominantly Black communities, especially where I was living. And so we had those conversations all throughout April and May. And, of course, we had watched Orange is the New Black. And all of a sudden I'm living it, and I'm living it for 4 years. And I don't know, I never had like a big vision of getting out or for the future. I'm pretty nihilistic. And, I went through some really, really, really tough times where I didn't even care, what happened to me. But all throughout that, there were these points of brightness where it was like, I need to remember this person. I need to remember her story. I need to remember what it was like to be in a federal lockdown after George Floyd was murdered. These are really important moments and experiences. And if people out there are listening to me, then it's my job to share these stories and experiences, and try to do what I can to lessen the systemic racism in my country.
It's really refreshing to hear someone, first of all, someone from Texas say that, right? But all kidding aside, you aren't a prototypical progressive, right? Like, you're not, like, how the world is polarized, right? Like that, I feel like there's only two camps a lot of times, and the people that don't belong to either of those camps are usually really apathetic and very quiet, right? So we have these loud groups that are always talking to each other, and you don't fit the mold of either side, right? There's parts of you that fit the mold of one side or the other, but together I feel like that you create like a good collage of a good citizen. And I don't even know what my question is. One question I wanted to ask you when you were talking earlier about your diet inside prison, I was wondering if anyone has ever given, like the media has ever given you a hard time for your religious beliefs.
They haven't, and it's kind of something that they just don't go over at all. It's something that's rarely talked about. I've done a lot of Christian podcasts. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's not something that's given a lot of light or airtime.
Is this your first atheist podcast? Because
if it is, it's the first one I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, I didn't even, it's not an atheist podcast. I just happen to be an atheist who has a podcast. But yeah, I was just curious because one of the things about you that I really like is that you are that sort of, I've been calling people like you, like the political ambidextrous. Okay. Like you don't need to plant a flag on the right or the left, but you're wise enough to see that you probably need both wings in order to fly politically, right? Like I feel like every time your country elects a Democrat or Republican, your nation is flying around with one bum wing. Yeah. And it's difficult to guide that ship. Do you think that America needs a third party, like a centrist party?
In order to be a true democracy, the ballot needs to be open to more than three parties. I understand that, that can detract and make sure that like the winner won't have a true majority at that point. But there should at least be multiple parties on the ballot. There should be multiple parties recognized. People should be willing to debate candidates from multiple parties. Because I mean, I do identify sometimes, or most of the time, as a Democrat, because I feel like even though they don't deliver on their promises in public, they're willing to address systemic racism. They're willing to address the climate. I understand there's a lot of corporate interests in there that get ugly, and Biden's only invested like $100 million into more policing, even though those of us on the left were saying we want to divest these funds into mental health crisis teams as opposed to the police. Mm-hmm. And that we wanted to basically start doing away with the war on drugs, not give $100 million to the police, not further militarize the police, when we don't believe half of these things are jail-worthy offenses. And but on the other side, it's like I can't I can't do with the right. I can't do with, the dog whistles. I can't do with the scapegoating of refugees or the conflating of fentanyl to the refugee crisis at the border. They're two separate things.
Mhm.
They exacerbate each other. Everybody is less safe because they're going on at the same time, but they are not the same thing. And so, as somebody living in one of the southernmost parts of Texas, um, I feel like both parties are letting us down.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we look at your politics too. And it's a lot of Americans, you might be an exception, I'm not sure, it doesn't matter either way, but a lot of Americans don't really realize that what happens in America finds its way to Canada. So we have a mega problem up here now, which is that ever since Trump, it's sort of awakened the fringe of conservatism that you don't really want to wake. And we have a new leader of the Conservative Party. He's the leader of the opposition up here, Pierre Poilievre, who courted these, the Canadian MAGA kind of fringe element up here, and it's directly related to, I guess all this stuff started during the Tea Party, but specifically Trump's election awakened this that kind of hard right philosophy up here, where overt racism is now more prevalent. These ideas about immigration are now overt, and it's an interesting cultural kind of phenomenon that we have to deal with that now. And I feel like the documents that you leaked, if the Intercept had done it right, it could have been something that not put us, not a bottleneck to that kind of cultural phenomenon, but at least kind of slowed it down a little bit, because now it's a joke to the right. The Russia hoax is really what they would call it, right? Like there is no part of them that wants to say, like, do you remember how anti-Russia the Republicans used to be compared to now? Like, I can't even believe my ears when I listen to these people speak, or at least when I did it over the last few years.
Oh yeah, I mean, if if Ukraine had been invaded by Russia during Bush's era, it would be totally different. It's crazy now.
Like, here's a comment from one of our listeners. This is Alex Jones just endorsed the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this would have been unheard of like 5 years ago. And it's let me ask you this. They just found about 10,000 times the amount of classified information at Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago? How do you say that? Mar-a-Lago?
Halago. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means.
It means orange douchebag, something like that. But then I heard you say, I think it was on an NBC interview, that they don't think that Trump should get jail time for having thousands of times more classified material in his possession than you had. I thought that was both interesting and kind of strategic in a great way. Can you tell us why you don't think that he deserves jail time for the classified documents that he has?
Right. So right now he's still under investigation, and I don't think that anybody should be immediately incarcerated undergoing an investigation. That's when investigations become weaponized.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I don't think that these laws surrounding classified materials need to be as strong as they are now. I understand that this information should not be brought to the public for free or just at any whim of any employee that may have access to them, and that's why I've always said I broke the rules and I know why I did, and I accept all responsibility. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to run around pointing at other people. Ha, you had 3 pieces of paper. You're going down. I don't do that because I don't want what happened to me to happen to anybody else. I think that this would have been a great time to engage with the right and say, you know what? The FBI does have a lot of power in the United States. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that we're not going to destroy somebody's career over an investigation, Hillary Clinton, that if you're found with classified information, you're automatically a spy. Those are the conversations that I was expecting to have. And of course, the left is so desperate to do anything against Donald Trump that they're saying, no, these laws need to be strengthened. And I'm like, no, they need to be made very specific as to, if you are committing espionage, there needs to be, country B. You need to know which country it is. Were they selling it? Is it actually national defense information? Because under what I was charged, 793E, willful retention and disclosure of national defense information, the prosecution, aka the government, has no burden to prove that what they define as national defense information is indeed national defense information. It does not say classified information. It just says national defense information. It could be a national defense stick figure for all they want to argue in court. So to make these laws more specific in the future so that people like me and people like Daniel Hale and Terry Aubry aren't doing 4 to 5 years in prison would be nice. But also, maybe he did commit espionage. We don't know, because while the FBI has way too much power, they're also extremely political, and they decide whom they're going to charge. And I personally, I'm not saying I would be like in tears if I was wrong, but Donald Trump has, had a foot on either side of the law since the 80s. It's not a secret. Like, whatever I don't know what you want to say, Occam's razor would point to incompetency over conspiracy. I'm thinking Illuminati, but that man is not going to be indicted for anything ever. But I just don't think that the left, basically surrounding the FBI with love and affection and respect, even though they've done nothing but abuse civil rights in this country, thinking that that's going to result in an indictment against Donald Trump is the right way to go. That's not the progressive way to go. And, I've said it before, the double-bladed sword is sharper on the backswing. Yes, Donald Trump was found with classified information, and you want to make that an automatic life sentence for everybody found, and that you want 5 years for every piece of paper, or you want, my sentence to be the starting when it should be the highest ever. I don't want anybody ever getting more time, unless you're actually committing espionage and you need to be detained so you don't commit more espionage. There needs to be a restorative justice approach to this. And then the idea of, we don't incarcerate former presidents, that shouldn't be a green light to go rob a Best Buy and shoot 6 people in the process. But, this is something where it is so politicized, and it's like under all the 8 clauses of the Espionage Act of 1917, you can see them charging him for it, but you can also see them not charging him for it. Maybe those 10,000 documents weren't national defense information. Every time I read these articles, because I was once the subject of them and I'm curious, it's always like sources say, or the DOJ released in a press statement, but there's never a name on it. And so anytime I see sources, I know that's illegitimate, or, somebody saying something on the download, the same way the prosecution would say things about my diary entries. Like, is there an indictment or not? And you can't just, investigate somebody indefinitely and use it as a weapon and use it as a reason why they're a bad person. And every time the left rallies around this and says, this is how the process goes, you're talking about another 5 million, of minority Americans being put under indefinite investigations for drug conspiracy. When you lessen the burden of proof that the government has, basically it means another 5 million people in jail. And it's very easy for white people to say that, because those 5 million people aren't going to be white. And that's a problem. I have a problem with the system of criminal justice in this country. I'm not going to ask them to have more power, because I think that somebody that I personally don't care for as a politician should go down.
Yeah.
We could put ourselves back 20 years if we give the DOJ more power, and they're still not going to charge the man. Reality check, they're not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there, for 2 reasons. One is what you just mentioned. We don't do that, or the royal we don't do that to ex-presidents. And also, I'm totally with you regarding what the left has done. When George W. Bush was president, all the left loved to do was to criticize, and rightfully so, I thought, the intelligence community and the FBI. That's what they did. And then as soon as Trump became president, all of the people that they used to criticize were now guest analysts on MSNBC. And it was really gross to see that, like it was hypocrisy playing out in real time. And
Yeah.
and I watched that, and and I started to like really understand American. I thought I had understood American politics to a certain degree, but when that happened, I was completely floored by how easily they betrayed their own principles.
Exactly. If you are for the left, you should be for minimum law enforcement. You should be for making more things not illegal or criminalized. And it just seems like all they've done is wanted more and more people to go to prison, and it's just like, I thought that my party was for more civil rights and for less prison.
We're gonna wrap it in a couple minutes here. I just wanted to see if you wanted to, because I know that we talked about this a little bit the first time we spoke like a week ago. The Robb Elementary School shooting. It's something that's impacted you, hasn't it?
I mean, it's outside my district. Definitely, I couldn't go, even if I had like a journalistic interest in going. But using my platform to elevate like what the families are going through has been a priority of mine, and to talk about, gun reform in Texas, as well as, talking about what Beto is going to offer if he becomes governor. Yeah,
Beto's an interesting cat. He looks so good next to the other governor candidates. I never really liked him all that much as a candidate for president. I just thought he came off a little bit too, I don't know, weak or something. Like he just seemed like he was saying all the right, really progressive things, but he didn't seem like a guy that would be a strong president. But a governor, maybe. He seems to make a lot of sense when it comes to the issues that are impacting people in Texas right now, especially the gun reform stuff. And I think he just announced 2 days ago that he wants to legalize marijuana. So the drug war in Texas might be lessened if he was governor.
Oh, absolutely. And, that's right there. That's criminal justice reform.
That's right. Reality Winner, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We'll talk on the phone in the next couple of days, because I want to see if I can help you out with the with some of the gun reform stuff that you want to take on. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Reality Winner, everybody. She is so smart. Like I'm so happy that I was able to have her on today. I thank her very much for being so generous with her time as well. She wow, what a life lived so far. And she's only, I think she's 30 something, 31 or something like that. But in any event, I think talking to her made me realize a couple of things that I didn't really understand before. One of them was the conditions of women's prisons. That is something that I certainly didn't know. Yeah, she is more of a hero of mine now than she was before I started talking to her about a week ago. So yeah, that was a really refreshing interview. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we are going to see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow we have sitting Senator Leo Housakos on. He's going to talk about Bill C-11, which is the Orwellian internet censorship bill from the Trudeau government. And yeah, we're going to have a good conversation there. So thank you once again to Reality Winner, and we'll see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Black